have been asking us what we were going to do with our spare time. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going down to the ranch Monday afternoon, and I'm going to sit on that front porch in a rocking chair for about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to read a little and write a little. Then I'm going to put on my hat and go out and find Walter Lippmann. Someone told me the other day that the press had had a few complaints about the treatment that you'd received during this administration. Well, this is a fine time to be telling me now. Why didn't you mention it sooner? Well, I've got some complaints of my own. Maybe I should have mentioned them sooner to you. Getting misquoted, for instance, is one thing I've got to complain about. I remember that Peter Hurd painting. You all remember that? I never said it was ugly. Actually, I thought it was a pretty good likeness, except for one little detail. It left off the halo.
In January of 1969, President Lyndon Baines Johnson began his final 20 days as President of the United States.
The man who sits in this chair sits in the chair that's been occupied by less than 40 men in the long history of this great republic. He is selected by the will and by the votes of a majority of the citizens of this republic. He must execute the philosophy and the policies of the people of this nation, regardless of his own personal feelings from time to time. He is the executor of the will of the people of this nation, and he carries upon his shoulders day and night a burden that always seems, at least to him, too much to carry, but only for him to carry.
The transfer of presidential power is at best a very difficult procedure. Historian Henry Graff has referred to it as the stirring rite of political renewal. In the foreword to a book on chief executives, which was published in 1966, President Johnson wrote, "Each of our presidents owes something to his predecessors. They share much with one another, yet each is different in himself. Together they reflect and renew the great diversity that is the wellspring of America's enduring vitality." During the early days of the month, President Johnson held a continuing dialogue with his fiscal advisors on the progress of the budget report. As the official balance sheet of the nation's business, it held the key to the content and final delivery dates of the economic report and the State of the Union message.
The story of America on the road ahead was going to be told in the terms of how we face up to and master the threat of inflation while preserving prosperity. How we maintain the strength of the dollar that has been challenged and is being challenged throughout the world. How we assure that our environment is livable and pleasing, and whether we can really carry out our commitment to bring our bypassed citizens into the full life of the nation.
To help sustain the momentum of these commitments and restrain a booming economy, President Johnson decided to ask Congress for a full year's extension of the 10% surtax, due to expire during the coming June. Amidst all the pressing last-minute activity, the formal ceremonies and private farewells, Mrs. Johnson took time to personally supervise the packing and moving of many of her family's personal belongings from the White House living quarters. Among the items remaining behind were the official portraits of the President and First Lady. In the executive office building across the street, the files of the Johnson years in the capital city, numbering over 31 million items from the House, Senate, and presidential years, were packed and readied for shipment to the Lyndon Johnson Library at the University of Texas. When the final history of the Johnson administration is written, there's little doubt that many of the fascinating passages will deal with the war in South Vietnam and the protracted struggle over the peace table in Paris, a struggle that had dragged on into the month of January.
We want peace so much, we're working at it diligently and earnestly, but it is an elusive thing, and we have been unable to find the formula that would give us peace with honor in that area of the world and stop the killing, although we will continue to search to the very last moment when we leave this office. I think that's the biggest disappointment we've had.
The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, has awarded the Distinguished Service Medal, 1st Oak Leaf Cluster, to General Earl G. Wheeler, United States Army, for exceptionally meritorious service in a duty of great responsibility. General Wheeler's deep professional competence.
The country's senior military spokesman during the war in Vietnam was General Earl G. Wheeler, who was now entering an unprecedented 5th year as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
And the United States of America.
His president's high regard for him has been forged in the fires of crisis and hardened in the day-to-day exercise of awesome responsibilities. His vision has been clear, and his counsel has been wise. He has served his nation with a soldier's skill and a patriot's devotion. The mark of that service is written large on the shield of America's defense: the might of its power, the effectiveness of its military forces, and the efficiency of their management. And for us all, the days of the future are brighter with the hope of peace, more confident of the preservation of freedom, safer with the assurance of our security, because Earl Wheeler was here when his country needed him. General, today, on behalf of the grateful people of America, I salute you.
As he neared the end of 5 years and 2 months in office, President Johnson could look back on other times, to other men, many of them good friends, and reflect with deep satisfaction on his administration's many legislative accomplishments. In domestic affairs, he had presided over a new age of progressivism. Much of the old agenda had reached fulfillment. Medicare had become an accepted part of American life. The voting booth and the doors to public service had been open to all Americans, regardless of their color. In a field where race, religion, and ideology had been formidable obstacles to progress, the Education Act of 1965 had cracked a constitutional and political impasse over church-school relationships and brought federal money directly to the slum areas where it was needed the most. Head Start, the Model Cities program, consumer protection, increased investment in manpower training, and the Housing Act of 1968 were a few of the many accomplishments of his years in the presidency. As a conservationist, President Johnson's record reflected his deep concern over the problems of a livable environment and the protection of our natural resources, a concern shared most notably by another member of the White House family.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to welcome you here this afternoon. This is an occasion that fills me with warmth and nostalgia and a great deal of pleasure. As I look back on the parade of people and ideas and attainments that have been marked here in this room, I am aware of how often there have been occasions heralding strides in conservation. Some of the faces I see here today were at the White House Conference on Natural Beauty in May of 1965. So many events since then come to mind, from signing acts for the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the Highway Beautification Act, to launching the many new seashores and national parks like the Redwoods. Today, we are issuing 4 new postage stamps, messengers that will go to homes and offices all over the country. They will bring a reminder and my personal hope that Americans will intensify their commitment to conservation in the time ahead.
I believe we have just witnessed one of the most creative and one of the most productive eras in the history of the entire American Congress. Collectively, they have written a record that I think has never been matched in all of our 188 years, and I'm proud of it.
On Monday, January the 6th, President and Mrs. Johnson journeyed to the Longworth office building on Capitol Hill for a reception given in their honor by the House leadership. Here, surrounded by so many of his former colleagues from the House and the Senate, President Johnson paid a warm and nostalgic tribute to old friendships and a record legislative achievement.
They didn't make the confirmation I wanted. They didn't ratify a treaty when I wanted to. But they did their job. And they did it as they saw it, and they did it well. And they did it better and this government than any other government in all the world, in my judgment. This Congress was my home for so long, and I love it so deeply And I know how it does rise to the demands of our time, and I hope and pray it will continue to.
3 days later, as a cold, biting wind swept across the Capitol Mall, several hundred dignitaries and a handful of officials from the Smithsonian Institution joined President and Mrs. Johnson and Chief Justice Earl Warren to celebrate the giving of a unique and handsome gift to the city of Washington. On the dais was financier and art collector Joseph Hirshhorn. Born in Latvia and raised in the Jewish slums of Brooklyn, Hirshhorn had become a millionaire by the time he was 29. Now, 40 years later, he was witnessing the realization of his most persistent dream, the groundbreaking for the vast new Hirshhorn Museum that would house the $50 million art collection that he had given to the United States.
National culture. And his administration was the first to recognize the importance of art in American life and to legislate in its favor. It is an honor for me to give my art collection to the people of the United States. I think it is a small repayment for what this great nation has done for me and others who, like me, arrived here as immigrants. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you something else. We Americans are a great, wonderful, generous people. We are wonderful, and I'm glad to be proud of one of the members of this family. I came here as a little boy brought by my mother when I was 6 years old, that's 63 years ago, and I'm glad I'm here.
Today and tomorrow are memorable days for this capital and for this country. Tomorrow, we will greet here in Washington 3 voyagers who can describe for us sights that have never been seen before by human eyes. Today, we celebrate the enriching power of art and the spirit of creation. We honor a most remarkable man and a most magnificent gift. Each of the events that we commemorate in these 2 days, the flight of Apollo 8 and the birth of the Hirshhorn Museum, tells us something about this country and its people. We are in love with science, with progress, with change, with adventure, with technology. Our reach into space expresses that enthusiasm and that determination. We are restless, questing, deeply moved by art and symbols that are concerned with inner things.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
On December 21st, 1968, 3 American astronauts, on the strength of a Saturn V rocket, began man's most far-reaching voyage of exploration, his first flight around the moon. 3 days later, as they swept into lunar orbit, they looked back to see the Earth as it really is, a small, wet, spinning planet on the edge of an inconsiderable galaxy, floating in eternal silence.
There's little that hasn't been said or written in praise of these famous men who have come here to the East Room with us this morning. We are quite naturally proud that they are all Americans. But we recognize that mere national pride is insufficient. That these men represented in the vastness of space all mankind, all of its races, all of its nationalities, all of its religions, all of its ideologies. For 7 days, the earth and all who inhabit it knew a measure of unity through these brave men. Colonel Borman, Captain Lovell, Colonel Anders. You have been where no human being has ever ventured. You have seen firsthand what no human eye ever saw before you. Your flight was an unparalleled achievement of technology. Yet behind the sophisticated hardware of space, Apollo 8 was a story of men. There were those first men who dreamed of powered flight into space. There were those men in our government who 10 years ago fought to guarantee America's role in space. I'm glad that I was one of them. Our space program, and this, its most spectacular achievement, have taught us some very invaluable lessons. We have learned how men and nations may make common cause in most magnificent and hopeful enterprises of mankind. And this morning I renew America's commitment to the principle and to its enormous promise. If there is an ultimate truth to be learned from this historic flight, it may be this. There are few social or scientific or political problems which cannot be solved by men if they truly want to solve them together. I'm very proud to present you with the NASA Distinguished Service Medals. They are very small tokens of our appreciation for what you've done for our country and for the world and for us.
Mr. President, I thought that we had experienced every emotion known to man in the 20 hours we spent in lunar orbit, but I must confess that I believe this just topped it. And I know I speak for Jim and Bill when I say we're three grateful Americans. Grateful to you personally. We recognize your interest and your contributions to the space program of our country, and we're grateful to this wonderful country. They've supported us in every way. And although we're symbolic of the country's greatness, we certainly feel very inadequate. And we're just very, very grateful. And sir, we did want to give you two things. We carried with us a space treaty around the moon, and Bill Anders would like to present that to you, sir. And Mr. President, Jim Lovell has a picture of the ranch I think he'd like to.
It was a ceremony without fanfare, and it was done with great care, with a meticulous mathematical precision. There were no reporters or correspondents there, only a handful of White House staffers who seemed to linger extra long outside the doorway to the office. Yet, to those who were present, the transfer of presidential desks was clearly an eloquent symbol of the shifting of presidential power, a moment which was now only a few days away. After a weekend stay at Camp David, President and Mrs. Johnson flew to New York City for a farewell dinner, which was being given in their honor at the Plaza Hotel. Hosted by 18 of the Johnson family's closest friends and attended by over 400 prominent guests from both political parties, the evening was truly a moment of gaiety and nostalgia. One of the highlights was a presentation by Governor Nelson Rockefeller of a capsule history of the Johnson presidency as written by 21 distinguished Americans.
We shared the dreams and the battles of a 5-year encounter with destiny. There will, in the years ahead, be many evaluations of all of the things that we did. But what really matters is not the ultimate judgment that historians are going to pass on the work that we've done and this period or even this administration. But what matters is whether there has really been a change for the better in the way human beings live in this country. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I really think there has been.
On Tuesday the 14th, President Johnson held his last formal meeting with the members of the congressional leadership. In a matter of hours, he was due to deliver his 6th and final State of the Union message in the House chamber. It was clearly a sentimental journey, but his decision to deliver the message in person had sent the historians among the journalistic fraternity back to their history books. They discovered that, as a presidential prerogative, it had not been invoked since the days of John Adams in 1801.
My distinguished colleagues of the Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor, not only officially but personally to me, of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, members of the Congress, and my fellow Americans. For the 6th and the last time, I present to the Congress my assessment of the State of the Union. I shall speak to you tonight about challenge and opportunity, and about the commitments that all of us have made together that will, if we carry them out, give America our best chance to achieve the kind of a great society that we all want. Every president lives not only with what is, but with what has been and what could be. Most of the great events in his presidency are part of a larger sequence extending back through several years and extending back through several other administrations. Urban unrest, poverty, pressures on welfare, education of our people, law enforcement and law and order, the continuing crisis in the Middle East, the conflict in Vietnam, the dangers of nuclear war, the great difficulties of dealing with the communist powers, all this much in common. They and their causes, the causes that gave rise to them, all of these have existed with us for many years. Several presidents have already sought to try to deal with them. One or more presidents will try to resolve them or try to contain them in the years that are ahead of us. But if the nation's problems are continuing, so are this great nation's assets. Our economy, the democratic system, our sense of exploration symbolized most recently by the wonderful flight of the Apollo 8 in which all Americans took great pride. And the good common sense and sound judgment of the American people and their essential love of justice.
The occasion was obviously an emotional one, and the message, low-key as it was, focused heavily on one word: commitment. The departure of one administration did not mean an end to the problems it had faced. The efforts to meet them had to go on year after year if the momentum that had been gained over the years wasn't to be lost. The very existence of promises like the anti-poverty program, the Model Cities Bill, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968 was a kind of reality in itself. Breaking those promises, especially those that had touched the lives of the poor, would be a tragic error.
But it is not fully completed, of course.
Greater revenues and reduced federal spending had changed the budgetary picture quite dramatically since the previous January. In the fiscal year ending on June 30th, the government would declare a $2.4 billion surplus, anticipating a year's extension of the 10% surtax. The budget for fiscal 1970 would provide a surplus of $3.4 billion.
It affirmed the historic goal of a...
The prospects for peace in Vietnam now seemed better than at any other time since the North Vietnamese invasion 4 years before.
And the free nations of Asia know what they were not sure of at that time, that America cares about their freedom, and it also cares about America's own vital interest in Asia and throughout the Pacific. And now, my friends in Congress, I want to conclude with a few very personal words to you. I rejected and then finally accepted the congressional leadership's invitation to come here to speak this farewell to you in person tonight. I did that for two reasons. One was philosophical. I wanted to give you my judgment as I saw it on some of the issues before our nation, as I view them before I leave. The other was just pure sentimental. Most of my life, most all of my life as a public official has been spent here in this building. For 38 years since I worked on that gallery as a doorkeeper in the House of Representatives, I have I have known these halls, and I have known most of the men pretty well who walk them. I know the questions that you face. I know the conflicts that you endure. I know the ideals that you seek to serve. And now it's time to leave. I hope it may be said 100 years from now that by working together, we help to make our country more just. More just for all of its people, as well as to ensure and guarantee the blessings of liberty for all of our posterity. That's what I hope. But I believe that at least it will be said that we tried.
On the evening after the State of the Union message, President and Mrs. Johnson joined the members of the Diplomatic Corps at the Pan American Union as they paid a farewell tribute to Secretary Dean Rusk and his wife, Virginia. On Thursday morning, just prior to the formal signing of the economic message, and with little more than 3 days remaining to him as chief executive, President Johnson startled Washington with a sudden and dramatic announcement.
Last night and this morning, we have had certain decisions that please us, that we have learned that certain basic procedural problems in Paris have been solved, and that new talks on the substance of peace in Southeast Asia can now open. So this year, I think the impartial record will show that we have made steady progress toward the peace that we all devoutly pray for. And I deeply believe that if we can only remain united in the days ahead, and if we can stay together on this path, we will achieve an honorable peace in Southeast Asia at the earliest date that it is possible to do.
The breakthrough, which came after 10 agonizing weeks of diplomatic maneuvering, meant that talks could now get underway. It could also mean that one day, happily, ceremonies like the one in the East Room on the afternoon of the 16th would no longer be necessary.
For the final time during my presidency, this House is graced with the company of the heroes who have scaled heights known only to a very few men in this land. The courage of the bravest in war is a very rare and a very special quality. It knows no rank or station. Generals and privates have won the Medal of Honor. Riflemen and sailors and pilots and priests have all worn it on their breasts. It has gone to every kind of man that our country has ever produced. They have come from the cities and the farms in every section of our land. They have lived in different times, and they have fought in different battles on different fields. They have demonstrated their bravery many, many times in different ways. But they have all shared one noble distinction. Each man heard the call of duty in an hour of hard challenge, and each man answered that call with a courage beyond demand. So now the names of Jackson and Pless and Lassen and Dix are added to this roster of the very brave, and the record of their deeds at the very summit of human testing will forever now be part of the history of valor. The words above and beyond the call of duty would never sound again in the world that we want and work for. Never again would war summons the best that men can give. But when that day comes, there will always be a high place of honor for the men who have bought it. For all the good and gallant fighting men who took their duty as they found it, and they discharged it always with the courage of giants.
A presidential inaugural is a moment balanced between the present and the future, when the nation waits for the voice of one man. But it is also a moment teeming with the memories of the past. For the men who had been closest to him and who had given the administration so much of its character and presence, their final meeting was a moment of tribute and laughter, touched with a sudden sense of loss and sadness.
This is the 80th cabinet meeting that I have had as president. The president's cabinet, his official family, he has a relationship with it not unlike his own family. They are, or should be, the closest counselors he has and the authorities in their respective fields, as well as his champion in every field.
For the members of the family, the hours seemed suddenly more precious. The moments spent in quiet and familiar rooms now became memories that will have to last for a lifetime. To some, of course, this moment in time was of little significance. One day, they'd be told how they spent their final hours here. A salute by the President's own, the United States Marine Band. On the morning of January 20th, Lyndon Baines Johnson began the final hours of his presidency. With the arrival of the president-elect at 10 a.m., both men would be caught up in a ceremonial timetable. A timetable that would, in effect, remove the burdens of office from the shoulders of one man and pass them on to the other. At 12:16 p.m., Richard Milhouse Nixon became the 37th President of the United States.
Most people come into the office with great dreams, and they leave it with many satisfactions and some disappointments, and always some of their dreams have not come true. And I'm no exception. But I'm so grateful and so proud that I've had my chance. And as to how successful we've been in doing the greatest good for the greatest number, the people themselves and their posterity must ultimately decide. I have the satisfaction, my family has the satisfaction, that we gave it all we had. And we think we provided some of the answers to the needs of our time.